This year we went on a trip to Virginia, Thanksgiving week. Hank, Pam, and Pete Huffnagel, each with our cameras. Here's a selection of what we saw. Pete flew in from Seattle, and this was the plan for the week. Fredericksburg, Richmond, Williamsburg, Charlottesville, and then back home. Pam and I drove down to get Pete at Douglas International Airport, and it was Saturday night, so we took care of church before his plane arrived. Went to this church, St. John the Apostle, in Leesburg. Pete's flight landed just when it should have. We hopped in the car and drove south to Fredericksburg, Virginia, where we stayed at a Marriott. The next morning, Sunday morning, we got up and wandered into Fredericksburg. And the first thing we met with was a woman with a dog.
They were Greyhound racing rescue dogs.
Yeah, they
They're retired, right?
Yeah, retired. And instead of who knows what, they were adopted. Family.
The attractions weren't open until noon because it was Sunday, and so we had some time to wander around, and we spent part of that time wandering around the town, out onto this long bridge across the Rappahannock River. Very picturesque. George Washington grew up across the river there. Then we went shopping, and here's Pam with her nose in the goods, and Pete smiling at me.
Out on the busy shopping street, there was a carriage with characters from the movie Frozen, and little girls were coming to have the carriage rides and get their picture taken.
And they were all dressed up as princesses, right?
Pretty much.
Yeah. So it finally got to be noon, and we went to Hugh Mercer's Apothecary shop. Hugh Mercer is the same man that Mercer County, Pennsylvania is named after. And he's sort of the reason we ended up in Virginia, because I gave a talk about how the counties of Pennsylvania got their names, and Hugh had an interesting life, which we won't go into here. This is a recreation of his apothecary shop, full of mysterious vials and flasks, and one of the reenactor docents let us experience these. It was very interesting. But the next room contained the real mysteries. Well, first of all, this is Hugh Mercer's desk. This was the good stuff. They had leeches in jars. You can see it on the left there, stretching up, trying to get to this young man. Lately arrived from London, finest Swedish leeches, brimstone, mercury, itch ointment, Spanish blister beetles, and valerian fit elixir, much celebrated to remove all manner of hysteric and hypochondriac afflictions. Very good stuff. So he took them out and held them in his hand, and it was amazing how quickly these leeches could move. I was much taken with them, but they didn't have any for sale. Moving down the street, we went to a very ancient tavern, Rising Sun Tavern, where statesmen lodged from 1760 to 1827. It was built by Charles, the youngest brother of George Washington. So we went inside and had the tour, and it was quite interesting. I could see myself sleeping here. This is a peculiar rig, a round hole in the door, and back then they wore wigs, and they powdered the wigs, and to keep from getting the powder on your fine clothes, you would stick your head through this hole and then be powdered and pull it out when you were done.
There's a little bathtub there on the lower left.
Oh yes, a hip bath, I think they call them. More stuff. I like the little stairs to get up into your bed.
Well, and then there often weren't enough beds for all the travelers, so some would have to sleep on those mats on the floor.
A lot of times they would sleep inclined, though, right? Up against the wall.
Some people would, yeah.
Yeah, and they thought it was good for your health. I like this down the stair shop pretty much. It was very interesting in the tavern. We then walked down the street to this...
A little coffee shop in the back. They had books you could read.
Next up was Mary Washington's house, where they won't let you take pictures inside. We had this young woman in her Red Riding Hood cape who took us around and told us this and that. Out the back of the house, though, there were some places where you could take photographs, so I don't quite know what this is. A place to sit, do you think?
Yes. Yeah, this is one of those kitchens that's in a separate building, so in case, you created too much heat, the house wouldn't heat up, or worse yet, if it caught fire.
Right, it wouldn't be the
burn
end
down
of
the house.
everything.
And Mary Washington was George Washington's mother. That's whose house we're looking at here.
We then were going to go to Washington's wife's family's home. We sprinted up there to be on time, but we're not allowed in, so we ended up just seeing this house and being miffed with them. We wandered over to the James Monroe Museum, and the woman there, as we were leaving, somehow the conversation turned to the Masons in Fredericksburg, and she said she could let us into the Masonic Cemetery, not something that everybody gets to see. And that was it for Fredericksburg. We moved on later that night down to Richmond, where we stayed at the Residence Inn downtown. And the next morning, Monday morning, we went to the Virginia Historical Society. Vast collection of flags. This is a dollhouse. You can see on the right there a big picture of a number of rooms, and Pete's there looking in from the side. I think you must have taken this picture, you think?
I think I
Yeah, with
Oh.
very long arms. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, well, you're right. Very nice stuff, very nice. The place was loaded up with art, and we're not going to say what was what. Oldest streetcar with some old advertising on the opposite wall. You could sit there and rest. After all that history, we next went more or less across the street to the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts, which was quite grand. We all liked this ball picture. When I was consolidating the pictures, we must have had 20 shots of this sculpture. Glass flames in the pond outside, although I like the fish picture better than that. I don't know what this is. I missed it somehow.
Oh, this is from the art museum.
Okay. Very 3D, poking
Mhm.
out. Looks like it's trying to get us. And I like the juxtaposition of these two photographs, old and new. It's trying to get the same view of Pete as Thomas Jefferson over there to the right. This I like. The picture in the middle is Art Deco, and on the right and the left are both modern day pictures that sort of have an Art Deco feel to them, to me.
This was in the Fabergé exhibit, so some of these were made by people in Fabergé's workshop. The little eggs.
We saw
Fabergé
quite a
style.
few Fabergé eggs.
Yes.
It was good times. This is more Fabergé things,
That's
right?
right.
Nice little plants. Look at those lilies of the valley on the left. And this was a good place. They had quite a Tiffany collection, many, many lampshades. Enjoyed that. The architecture was sweeping and grand, and inside it's very nice. This is a curious shot out one window. I took this with my camera, which is just in my little phone. Pam has a better camera than me, and you can see the difference. Much more colorful. And then Pete has the grandest camera of all, and you can see just how sharp this is. They almost look painterly, these pictures, I think. I forget where we took this picture of us eating, but I know we took Uber from the art museum back to our hotel.
Yes, Farmyard Restaurant.
Yeah. The next morning we were up bright and early, and the first thing we saw was the Egyptian building, something Pam had found on TripAdvisor. Walked uphill, 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 and eventually came to it. It was well worth the walk. Makes you want to run off to Egypt, I think. Once we were done with that, we went to the Hollywood Cemetery. Each trip that we take at Thanksgiving, we try and see old rocks for some reason. Sometimes these are tombs, and sometimes they're old Indian dwellings, megaliths. This year we were going to see a pyramid at Hollywood Cemetery. And there it is in the distance. This was built late 1800s to commemorate the Confederate War dead. And we got many, many pictures of this as well. Looks like you could cut yourself on it. I like this one because it's so atmospheric with the beams shining down. This is a dog we all liked. This is me pretending to be an old man. And on the right there you can see a shadow created by the fallen leaves from that tree. We were all taken with that and how very yellow it looked. This is Monroe's tomb. There's 2 presidents buried in Hollywood Cemetery, Tyler and Monroe. Nice view of the river. Next we went to Louis Ginter Botanical Garden, which was excellent. Consider that this is November. There was still an amazing amount of plant life to photograph. And this what would you call this? A tree house?
I think they called it a tree house.
Okay. We have treehouse pictures taken from every conceivable angle, just as they meant for it to be. Here we are walking through the Japanese garden, holding up very well, and they had a lot of topiary animals all bedecked with lights for Christmas. Isn't this a nice and strange picture?
Yeah, I kind of wish we got to see it at night.
Yeah, it would have been good. A giraffe. A pitcher plant. I like this. This is one of my favorite pictures. I don't know who took it, but they got a good one. Wasn't me. Pete and I in the gazebo. It was Pete has his hood up. It must have been chilly. More peculiarness, getting ready for Christmas. And then it was into the greenhouse, the marvelous greenhouse. It wasn't fall in the greenhouse. There were some great orchids in there. Christmas decorations. Some sort of a kids section where things went strange. All of a sudden we started seeing these longish bugs crawling through the scenery. And it was startling at first, and then we had a good time trying to spot all the ones. When we went back to the main desk, I told the lady, your greenhouse has a worm infestation. And she became very concerned. She said, more worms and some little spiders. And that was it for Richmond. That night we drove down to the Williamsburg area and stayed in the worst hotel that we've been in for some time, the Hampton Inn and Suites. Room number 1, the toilet got plugged up, and when I called the desk to have someone come and unplug it, she said, there's nobody here, just me. You'll have to wait till morning, and she gave us a different room. Room number 2 seemed all right at the start, but its heater wasn't heating, and it was just making an enormous racket in the process of not heating. It was cycling and getting nothing done. Pam was in this shawl, and we have this sort of, I call it the immigrant photograph, where we all look like we're just off the boat. It was interesting. They moved us to a third room, and it still wasn't perfect, but we were so worn out that we stuck with it. It was all right. We were there for 2 nights. The next morning, bright and early, we drove down to Jamestown, one of the best places we saw, I thought. We watched a short film on the history of Jamestown and then walked down to the site itself, and we're just in time to join this tour. You see the man at the upper right there? That's our tour guide holding his hand up just so This guy was the best speaker I've heard in a long, long time. He said that I could tell this story 3 different ways at least. I could tell it from the settler's point of view, from the slave's point of view, or from the Indian's point of view. So I'm going to tell it from the settler's point of view. And that's not to say the others aren't equally valid. And then he started, and he made a story of it as he walked from site to site, and it was just excellent, I thought. We trailed around after him for the better part of an hour and a half. This is a recreation of one of the houses that the people would have been living in. Here he is in a church. You can see the people that were buried there. He spoke for quite some time about how they came to be there and who they were. You'll have to visit for yourself. We'll have to go back again. He's down in a hole, always prowling around, sticking his nose in things, talking constantly. Finally ended up sitting on benches watching him end the talk here. And then we were free to wander the grounds. We went to a little snack shop and then on to the museum that's on the site. It was very good. Somehow, though, this trip to Jamestown was sucking up the whole day. We had originally planned to go to Williamsburg, Jamestown, and Yorktown all in one day. I'll tell you, that didn't work out. Still, we were happy as can be in Jamestown. Captain John Smith was a big name down there. The National Park Service owns half of it, and the Jamestown Preservation Society owns the other half, and they work together to preserve the site. The government part looks like this, and was quiet on that day. They may have tours, but we missed them. So next we went to Jamestown without the E, which is a recreation of what Jamestown would have been like based upon best historical evidence. It's maintained and run by the same people that handle Yorktown and Williamsburg. Lots of people standing around in period costume willing to talk to you, which was quite interesting. There's 3 main areas. This is the Settlers' Fort, sort of a triangular area, and these are some of the workers. I don't know what that guy on the left is up to there. Looks like a vise of some sort.
Woodworking, it looks like. Looks like he's making a join.
Okay. Oh yeah, it clamps down, I see. Uh-huh.
Well, if you look at his hand there, he's got the...
Oh, okay. I see. Right. And then this guy at the right with the musket gave a little demonstration, filling it up, loading it up, and on the right he's firing away. The second area we went to was the ships. There were recreations of 3 of the Jamestown supply ships. They were smaller than you would expect, but that's the way it was back then. And they were fun to prowl around, no problem at all, touching anything, taking pictures of anything. That is one big advantage to a recreation over having the real stuff. The final area at this place was the Indian settlement. Here we see the exteriors of their houses and the interior arrangements for sleeping. But that was it pretty much for the day. We never did get to Williamsburg except to drive around. Ended up eating Chinese in our hotel room somehow or other. But that was fine. It was a good day, even though the hotel was not 5 stars. The next morning we hit the road, going from Williamsburg up northwest to Charlottesville, where my brother lives. So you see Pam at the upper right as she looked, leaving the Hotel of Doom. And at the lower left, that's Pete with his 2 cousins, Charlie and Libby. We spent Thanksgiving Day with them, had quite a good time. Somehow we came away with no pictures. And the next day, Friday, our last day, we went to Monticello, or Monticello. It depends who you are, what you call it. We bought our tickets and joined the queue and took a tour of the place. Here are Pete and I waiting for the tour. That's our guide over to the left. She was quite competent. I like that wreath a lot. How about you guys?
Yes.
A willow oak. I need one of these for our backyard. Below the house is the gardens. This is sort of like an observatory where Thomas Jefferson could stand in here regardless of the weather and look out over the hills of Virginia. This is another thing I'd like to put in our backyard, but the view wouldn't be of the hills of Virginia, unfortunately. We spent some time wandering around the garden. Virginia, the plants aren't quite done in November, at least not this November. Pam taking a picture of me, taking a picture of Pete, taking a picture of leaves. This mysterious plant we were a long time in figuring out. This is a castor oil plant. And it's poisonous unless you treat it just right. Sunflower. Don't know, but it's pretty. Here are Pete and I staring off into the distance. After the gardens, we had a look at Thomas Jefferson's grave through the fencing, took pictures of one another, and then walked down the hill back to the visitor center. We were just about done with our trip. At the visitor center, they had a copying machine such as Thomas Jefferson used to make copies of his letters. And both Pete and I gave it a try. He was much more successful than I. And here are representative pictures of each of the three of us on this 2016 trip. The trip was over, however. It was time to put all the luggage one last time into the trunk of the car, hop into the car, and spend the afternoon driving north and east up to Dulles Airport, where Pete boarded his plane and Pam and I headed further north towards the wilds of northwestern Pennsylvania.